Welcome to the Noble Ape podcast, Ape Reality. I'm Tom Barbalet, and today, well, something as exciting as the file format of Noble Ape. I know, what an amazing topic to record a podcast on. And I thought I might do some other kind of editorial discussion, but something particularly important in this podcast, you will not be hearing some strange scraping sound. I have been recording on my iPhone headphones, and I didn't realize that as the headphone buds in the ears started to drop out and I put my finger to stop them, they would create a strange scraping sound that unfortunately haunted the previous podcast. Apologies for the strange scraping sound that occurred, a couple of podcasts ago actually, because I recorded a video podcast recently. So what has been going on of late? Well, Bob Mottram and I have been tag-teaming efforts for probably about a month now associated with various Noble Ape developments. I've been doing an extensive bug-fixing effort associated with the file format, having discovered, to my shock, having implemented the auto-load file function, that the current file format doesn't in fact accept auto-load, auto-save as easily as I would have liked, and it had various memory error conditions actually, particularly on Windows and Linux. So in looking at this, I've also considered including a compression algorithm associated with the brain and weather information as it's saved in the file format, because really, that's something that can be compressed. It doesn't really contain any meaningful information, and that kind of compression-decompression part is relatively easy to include in the simulation. So I've added the compression-decompression section, and now it's just a matter of changing the file format. I'm also going to pull out a few of the structures that Bob Mottram has created and make them kind of standalone structures, and so more of the richness of the internal structures can be exposed, make longer strings associated with the file format, but I am not yet moving to XML. So that is the footnote to this little piece of information. There will be no XML import in the near future. Although having recorded that, if you go back to previous podcasts, basically everything I say on the podcast that I won't do, very much like Steve Jobs, ends up being the case. So no doubt XML coming very shortly following that particular interpretation. But I've really enjoyed the kind of tag team element associated with developing Noble Ape with Bob Mottram in parallel. And recently I think Bob's gone on to do other things, in large part because I'm kind of stuck in my own internal file format, file changing, I don't know. It's strange, actually, because the bug-fixing component of Noble Ape, you would imagine, would be somewhat the most frustrating and the most boring, but it's actually been by far the most time-consuming for me recently, with the view that I have other interesting things to do, like the social simulation. Also, I want to create some external documentation or self-documenting sections, particularly as the file format changes, becomes larger, these kind of things, and also ApeScript errors. I've had some correspondence with Chris McIntosh associated with ApeScript, however, I haven't had much correspondence with him in the past couple of weeks, so my assumption is either he's tinkering with ApeScript or he's going on to other things. And in other news, I'm kind of self-assessing a variety of the podcasts that I'm recording currently. For folks who are subscribed to Stone Ape, you'll notice a cutback in those, primarily due to my work, but also just because Heron's going in a different direction to me, and there's not a lot of stuff to really record on currently. Truth be told, the way I listen to podcasts has changed quite dramatically since I got this MacBook Pro, because what I used to do previously was use my Mac Mini as my podcast download station. Every morning I would sync with podcasts. Now I sync my podcasts once a week, with the view that I've been doing a lot of writing as well. I think I'll probably put out a new Noble Ape book in the near future, because certainly there's a need for a contemporary philosophical discussion associated with Noble Ape, with the view that it will attract maybe not so sciencey folk, maybe more popular science or these kind of things. And I think there are certain underlying elements in the Noble Ape simulation which are still interesting. And you would kind of imagine that I would be saying things like that, since I'm, I guess, fundamentally drinking my own Kool-Aid in this circumstance. In terms of Noble Ape development-related news, just really trying to get things together. The Linux version is really phenomenal currently. In fact, the curious thing is that we'll probably end up with Mac and Linux being the primary supported platforms going forward. Mainly because although I work with Windows machines, I don't have access to Windows machines at home. And the Windows maintenance is proving, interesting to do in parallel. I think probably there'll be some simplification of the, it won't appear in any of the user interface, but just some simplification in terms of the underlying handling within the simulation, and that will make some of the maintenance associated with the different platforms slightly easier. But also I'm having a great degree of fun with the command line stuff. I'm using it for a lot of the debugging work currently, and because there's a build script associated with it now, and one that's compatible with Mac and Linux, it's something that I can easily do when I need to test out various things. So for example, with the recent file handling stuff, I've used it to do various byte checks and other things which are relatively boring and eclectic, but also very necessary for continuously run simulation. The whole biota thing is a little problematic in terms of getting up and starting it again. I'm working on the biota transcripts, but because my writing currently is really maybe 2 or 3 substantial projects, one of which is the transcripts, I have other things to work on in parallel, and I guess the critical mass is coming with some of my other writing currently, the sequel to Field of Chaos, if nothing more. Lots of after-hours work with Noble Ape. The interesting thing for folks who want to get a sense of the amount of source code that's being worked on, if you go to nobleape.com/sim, you will see the subversion graph. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's interesting because SourceForge has had kind of ups and downs associated with that particular subversion graph. And sometimes even though work's being done, it's not actually reported on the subversion graph. So if you see flatline sections, it's probably more likely that the subversion graph is not actually updating versus that there's no work going on in the simulation. But it will give you an indication of the pulse of the simulation and also the kind of stuff that is happening. I would like to do a release in the near future. In fact, what I'm really interested in hearing from is folks who are listening in who would like to receive particular updates associated with the simulation, because certainly what I've done recently with folks such as Chris McIntosh is do local builds of the simulation and pass them on so they can get the absolutely up to the second feature without having to wait for the next release. That's something else I wanted to mention. So, 15 years of Noble Ape, you folks have already heard Bo Daly, and I guess you were also hopefully waiting to hear Douglas Rushkoff. Well, unfortunately, the Rushkoff recording was going to be about 30 minutes, and that was going to be about 15 minutes. And then I said to Douglas, when he actually had some free time, let's get together and have a long discussion associated with the Noble Ape development. Because 15 minutes, I just didn't think it was going to be enough time for Douglas actually to get around to, talking about what he liked about the Noble Ape development. We've had some correspondence since, and it looks like Douglas is going to be both a recipient of and also the participant in a broad-ranging set of Noble Ape-related discussions that in large part are also tasked to me. And I think some of these discussions will actually form the framework of what I've described as the popular fiction Noble Ape, popular science Noble Ape book that will be coming out in the, as soon as I can produce it. The interesting thing working with Lulu is that there is a preference for an under 200-page and almost really under 100-page book, just in terms of their pricing structure. So I think there may be some potential for a slightly shorter work associated with the Noble Ape development, maybe highlighting half a dozen of the interesting areas and just expanding on those in a greater degree of detail. But time will tell. It's a project that is still in its very infant stages, and I think when we have Douglas on to actually do some extended discussion, then folks will get a sense of what it might actually look like. But that, unfortunately, is slated till July, so the June 13th, 15th year anniversary of the Noble Ape development will probably go rather quietly, unfortunately. In addition to Douglas Rushkoff, I will also have on James Murata. And James Murata is at Oxford University still. The stuff that I passed on to Bo wasn't quite accurate, but he's currently on holiday. He'll get back to Oxford in a kind of mid-July time frame, and we'll get him on one of these very biota podcasts to talk a little bit more about what he's doing currently and also his early recollections of the Noble Ape development. So very similar to Bo Daly, to have a connection to the Noble Ape development at CERN and also Oxford and, Apple and Intel and these kind of places. Always good, always positive, and something which strikes me as a little bit surreal. But then again, I have a house with a library and a series of cats. What am I to complain about? Anyway, so this is Tom Barbalet in Las Vegas, Nevada. If you have any comments, any questions, any conspiracy theories you would like to float my way, please get in contact with me. And in terms of these particular podcasts, I was thinking of adding slightly more directed discussion associated with particular concepts in the simulation, mainly because these ideas are maturing in particular directions, and it would be nice to actually get that audio out to folks so you could get a sense of the development pulse associated with the simulation currently. Anyway, please feel free to get in contact with me if you have any comments and questions, tom@nobleape.com. Thank you very much for tuning into this podcast. Look forward to you tuning into the next podcast.